I come from what's got to be the most prim and proper family there is. I was born in the States, but my parents had emigrated from England just after they were married. My dad was a teacher and had been offered a teaching job in a small town out in the middle of nowhere. Those towns were desperate for teachers, and they were offering good money. My mom had already been engaged 3 times. She was a looker and had no trouble attracting attention from the opposite sex. She was only casually engaged and then would break it off when things got too serious. At that time, my mom was young and had her whole life ahead of her. She worked at a local department store, which was where my dad's dad worked in management. My future granddad and my mom struck up an easy friendship. And when he invited her to a party to celebrate his 60th birthday, how could my mom refuse? What she didn't know was that it was a setup for his son David. They were introduced and got along well enough. My dad was everything my mom hadn't dated. He was stable and smart and had a bright future. My mom had always dated the super good-looking bad boys, the ones who rode motorcycles and had no future plans. My dad was different. He was planning on moving to the United States, and that was so new and exciting. After a couple of months, my dad asked if my mom would want to join him. He didn't actually say, "Will you marry me?" But in those days, if you asked someone to move with you, that's what you were asking. They were married in a small church and emigrated to the States a month after, where their life together really began. My dad's job got off to an interesting start. He was used to teaching older kids, but when he arrived, quickly learned he would be teaching at an elementary. They didn't have much money, so lived in a small trailer for those early years. They had a Malamute dog named Sika and a cat named Tipsy. And then along came my brother, and then me, 6 years younger, and a girl. My parents were saving up for a house, trying to make that perfect life, that American dream. They worked hard and got the house, a 2-story new build. They were already way ahead of where their friends were back home, struggling to even find work and afford property. They were carving out that perfect life. My mom was very into appearances, always had been. We always had to look perfect and have perfect manners. My dad wasn't as uptight, but definitely jumped when my mom said jump and followed her completely. If my mom said we weren't dressed nice enough and to go change, my dad would back her up, even though we knew he would never force us to if he was on his own. It was hard to play that role of the perfect family. I didn't want to be that. I just wanted to be a kid, have fun, explore, and play with my friends. I didn't care what other people thought about us or me. Growing up, I learned to keep a lot of my thoughts and interests to myself. If they weren't something my mom approved of, they would be shot down. Anything that made me different or stand out wasn't a good thing. In my mother's eyes, she wanted the cookie-cutter life and was really good at keeping up appearances. So when I was 14 and discovered a strange craving, I kept it to myself and did my best not to indulge it. I found myself thinking about urine a lot. When I would go to the washroom, I liked to listen to it landing in the toilet. And to my initial disgust and surprise, I found myself wondering what it would taste like. I figured maybe it was something lacking in my diet and started doing some research on the topic. I wasn't really coming up with much, and the cravings were only getting stronger. While I wasn't finding much about people craving drinking urine in the modern world, I did learn that there was something called urotherapy that dated back to the world of ancient medicine. There was a long history of people drinking urine to treat a number of ailments, from acne to cancer. There were even some parts of the world that still believed in the curative powers of urine. So I had to wonder if maybe I had some ailment I didn't know about. Maybe I was some kind of old soul who believed in this stuff. Who knows? Maybe I was the reincarnated spirit of a doctor from the ancient world, and I had treated patients with urine. And somehow those latent memories were creeping back into my conscience. I didn't understand any of it, to be honest. Why would someone suddenly start craving urine as a beverage? I fought the good fight and resisted for as long as I can. It wasn't until a year after the craving started that I gave in and tried it. I drank my own, of course, and it's not like it tasted wonderful or anything, but it definitely satisfied that craving. Then I thought, good, maybe that's it now. Maybe I'll never crave it again. The next day, though, the craving was even stronger. All I could think about was how I could ever tell my perfect mother. I pictured sitting her down at her perfect Chesterfield, watching her straighten the doily on the coffee table in front of her until it was perfectly centered and straight, and then saying, "Mother, I have something to tell you. I seem to have developed some strange addiction to drinking urine. Are you okay with that?" I couldn't help but stifle a laugh. My mom would, quite possibly, drop dead right then and there. I thought of my dad sitting next to her poker straight, peeking over at her to gauge her reaction so he could mimic it perfectly. Maybe I could just keep it a secret. I was worried, though, about my health. I went to a local clinic, the kind you go to if you are young and in need of something like birth control or condoms. I figured there were doctors there, and I didn't want to go to our family doctor in case he called my parents. When I was led into the office and sat and waited, I wondered how this would go, if this doctor had ever heard what I was about to confess. When the doctor came in, she seemed very nice and approachable. She asked what brought me in that day. I had my hands clasped in my lap in front of me, and my legs placed perfectly together, and was sitting up straight, just as my mom had taught me a young lady ought to sit. I cleared my throat and said, "I'm embarrassed to say this, but I didn't know if it was something super serious or not, or if I needed treatment or something. I don't want to tell my parents, but I seem to be addicted to drinking urine." She looked at me for a moment without blinking and then cleared her throat. "Oh," she said. There was a moment of silence, and then she asked how old I was. I told her I was 15. She said I seemed a lot older than that and asked why we couldn't include my parents in the conversation. I briefly explained to her what my parents were like, that my mom was a raging perfectionist, and that I really wasn't sure if she would completely disown me or not for not following along with her perfect family plan. She said she understood, but that she was obligated, because I was underage, to notify my parents of any kind of treatment or follow-up. I asked her what she thought. She said that there were people with strange craving addictions all over the world. She said that although drinking urine could introduce bacteria and toxins into my bloodstream, it didn't pose any huge major threats to my health. She recommended seeing a dietitian, but pointed out that she would have to call my parents. I told her it was okay and that I would kick the habit on my own. I told her I didn't need any treatment and that I had gotten what I needed from her. I hurriedly put on my coat and headed out the door. The thought of telling my parents was simply too much to think about. I knew they couldn't handle it, and I felt like my mom would never look at me the same way again, once she knew. I decided then and there that I would just not indulge my craving. I tried every kind of juice and beverage to replace my urine craving, but nothing gave me that same satisfaction. I did, however, stop drinking it. Anytime I have a craving to drink urine, I go for a run. As it turns out, I've become quite a good runner. I'm now on the track team at school and led us to a district championship. My craving to drink urine led me to my biggest talent, long-distance running. Am I simply trying to outrun my addiction? Possibly. But it's still better than being disowned by my parents. And it works. To watch more animated story videos like this, hit that subscribe button. And tell us in the comments section what you thought about this story.